Hello everyone, welcome to Transvirtual's October webinar. Good to have everyone joining us. We've just got a couple more people coming in, so we'll just give them another second. As you know though, today's webinar will be focusing on our chain of responsibility forms. This is an area of Transvirtual that we find a lot of customers don't necessarily know about or utilize as much as they could. It's a great alternative to going out and buying a fully fledged system. A lot of our customers who do use this module find that it just gives them a sense of compliance through the system. We'll cover off some of the key areas today, but definitely something that whenever I talk to people, I'm always making sure they're aware of. When you roll out Transvirtual, normally you're looking to get the basics right, your consignment creation, your invoicing, getting those notifications out to your customers, getting your drivers using the app, and obviously raising invoices for your customers and getting paid. The forms module is a great little addition once you feel comfortable with all those little areas, or if you're still working on everything, it can be run in parallel. It's a great one to introduce. Again, just making sure you're getting most out of the system. As I'm sure anyone who normally attends these webinars would hear, it's all about squeezing as much as you can out of your investment. So with today's session, what we'll be covering off is I first just have a quick update on our mobile apps, some details there for Android and Apple users. We'll then dive into a COR forms overview. I'll take you through where in the system you can find them. I'll then talk you through our templatized forms, how you can look at them. We'll then also go through whereabouts in the system you can find completed forms too. So in regards to Transvirtual's latest app updates, good news for all Android users, our new TMS app is now live. If you're an Apple user, you would have already had access to our new app. We've had that up for a month or so. Just for anyone who's using Android at the moment, what you'll have is the ability to download our new app. It is a separate app in the store. So if you go to the Google Play Store and search for Transvirtual TMS, you will find that there as a separate app you can download. In regards to our app now, for our TMS users, the system will be the same. So for Android users and iPhone users, you're going to have the same app moving forwards. So it's been a long time coming. Appreciate everyone being patient, but now when you get a driver, you can show them the same app, you can train them on the same app regardless of what device they're using. So nice and easy moving forwards. For anyone who's looking at transitioning to the new Android app, just before you roll out to your team of drivers and staff, I would recommend just downloading it on one device first, have a play around with it, get familiar, build a bit of a strategy to train up your staff. In my opinion, the new app is a lot more intuitive. It's a lot more user-friendly, so your drivers should have no trouble adjusting to it. But as with anything, it'd be great to get in there, have a bit of a play around, do some test scanning. That way, when your team come to you with questions, you feel confident and can make sure you can quickly answer and troubleshoot any issues they're having. If you do have any questions around that Android app or the iPhone app, please reach out to us as well. Just a quick one as well, for any WMS Transvirtual Warehouse users, we do also have the Android and iOS app available now. So in regards to the available functions within the app, it is quite limited. It'll let you search for bin locations as well as stock items across your warehouse. You can also assign stock movements to a staff member and have them complete them. If you're using the warehouse module and you'd like to reach out to us just to get a bit of an overview of the app, feel free to reach out directly to me. If you're not using our warehouse module today and you'd like to learn a little bit more, please reach out as well and we can lock in some time just to review it. So let's jump over. We're going to go now into our forms module. I'm going to share my screen. I'll take you through the Transvirtual web portal first. We'll have a little chat through where you can access these forms, what do those templates look like, and then we'll jump into the mobile app and we'll go through a few examples before we start to dig into how we can actually configure those templates. So as we jump in, within the Transvirtual app, I'll find my forms modules under my reports tab here. So firstly, in terms of configuration, before we start in and get people using them, we need to set up these forms and make sure they're accessible to the team. So under the configuration, the report tab, under configuration and setup, I'm going to go down to my mobile form template. Now, just a quick note, if you're not seeing that configuration tab, that is limited to admin users within your system. So if you're not seeing that tab and one you think you should, or you'd like one of your administrators to get in there and have a look with you, just reach out to them and make sure that either they upgrade your access or you do a little session with them to talk through. When you get into the forms list here, first thing you're going to see is your system templates tab. These are all the templates that we've set up in the system before you. So these are forms that we've created beforehand that you have available to you to use. In order to get that available to your staff members, select a templatized form and just click copy template. What that will do is that's then going to take you over and create a template, copy of that template, sorry. It's going to pop that over in your forms list here, which you can see visitor contract log 1. I can rename that. And then what I can do is decide when that will trigger for my staff members. So in terms of triggering, we've got a few options available to us. We can trigger this form to pop up when someone logs into their device, logs into the mobile app. When they hit leave depot or return depot from the mobile app. We can use specific scans as well. So that's typically for our staff in the depots or in the warehouses when we're scanning. For example, a damaged freight scan may trigger a damaged freight form. We can also just set them to be triggered at any time as well. And what this lets you do is just say this is an ad hoc form that could be triggered whenever we need, and we can actually select that from the list if we need to. For every form, we then can link it to a vehicle, a user, a consignment, or also vehicle components as well. So services, repairs, and fuel too. So there's a few forms available and options to link it. So logically, if we're doing things like driver pre-start checklists, so making sure your driver's not under the influence of any drugs or alcohol, they're medically fit to drive, we'd likely want to link that to our user. Whereas something like a vehicle check that's been done, we may link that to the vehicle itself. With any form, we'll go into this a bit later, but you can essentially set up alerts or times when a question should trigger an alert to go out. And normally that's when a no or a concerning response has been given to any of the answers we've set out. What we can do is set an email address to trigger an email to the appropriate person. In the event, for example, a driver has answered no to any of the driver pre-start checklist questions, for example, someone's nominated they're under medication that's affecting their ability to drive, we can nominate an email to go through to a manager. We could nominate an SMS to go through to a manager, alerting them of that issue. Now, in the app, we'll see shortly as well, it's obviously not going to let them progress past that. So if we're triggering our driver pre-start checklist at the point when we're hitting leave depot, if someone's hit no on one of those ends, it's going to actually prevent them from going ahead. So they're not going to then hop into the vehicle. It'll actually make sure that a supervisor needs to intervene to do something about it. We've also got the option to trigger customer service tickets in the event that a form is completed. So you've got a few options here. One, you can say don't ever trigger it. So example for things like a visitor contract log or a user filling out a form for a driver pre-start checklist, we don't need to. But in the event where we have damaged freight that's being filled out, we could say always create a customer service ticket when we need to. We could also say only create when the alert is triggered as well. And when we talk about the alert, later on when we talk about how we can configure these reports and adjust them, there's actually certain questions that can trigger an alert when an answer is provided. And that drives those emails, that drives those SMSs, and also controls the ability to progress along in those form questions to make sure someone's not proceeding if they've given an answer we're not happy with. So as you go through, I'd recommend just to start with, pick a couple of forms that look like they'd be worthwhile for you to have a look at. Just copy those templates over, set them up. What I'd suggest is instead of immediately turning on something like a driver pre-start checklist or a driver fit for duty, don't turn it on, for example, for leaving depot and then say every time they go to leave depot, turn it on. You might just want to do some testing initially, set it to any time. So that way it's not triggering for your drivers. And then you can have a play around and do some testing without suddenly rolling out a feature to all of your staff. So now I've got a few forms activated in my system. We're going to jump over into the mobile app and we're going to start to look at just how some of those forms appear, what is that layout? What is the user experience like when we're going through and adjusting? And then we'll jump back in, and after we've had a look at those pre-configured templates, we'll start to talk about how we can adjust them or even create our own brand new templates as well. So coming across, for anyone who hasn't seen our new app before, this is the new layout. So for your drivers or your staff on the floor, when they log in, they'll see this new clean layout. When you're accessing forms, to access a form for an ad hoc one, you can simply click on the menu on the left-hand side, and then there's do a report as an option. So from here, I'm going to see all those different forms available to create my ad hoc report. What I might do is take us through the driver fit for duty ones first. It's quite a common one against our customer base. It's very simple to roll out. A lot of people use the pre-built template because it's pretty straightforward. So as I go through here, I can start to fill out these questions as a driver. First one, do I have the correct license class required? Yes. Is my license valid? Yes. Do I have the requirement for the rest period? Do I understand everything for my fatigue? Yes. Am I impaired? So for example, for this one, if I said I was impaired and clicked yes, the system knows that's an undesirable answer. And what it's actually done is said, okay, based on your answers, we can't let you proceed here. You need a supervisor to come talk to you about this and let us know why we should keep going with this or why we should not prevent them from going ahead. So in the system, I'll show you, you can actually set up a requirement for a password to be entered by a manager in the event that we're happy to go beyond this. In the event as the driver, I just wasn't concentrating. I hit yes, I'm impaired when I actually wasn't. I can go back and say, oh, actually, I'm going to reread that and I'm going to change my answer. No, I'm not impaired. And now I can continue on with my form. Not impaired by any illegal alcohol or drugs, and there's no reason why I should not be driving today. Perfect. So I'm all complete. As a driver, I can now go about my day. So as I mentioned before, when we talk about triggers, we may want to trigger that from things like our load screen when we're leaving the depot. There's other triggers as well. We could trigger it upon the login to a device. So if I log out here, for example, I believe what we can do is trigger our forklift pre-start checklist, which I've just set to go on here. So I'll select my vehicle. And then I've set a prompt so that I need to fill out my forklift pre-start checklist from here. So I'll select the vehicle and go through. Now, again, what we can do is just define when this event triggers. So I've done this for logging into the app itself rather than leave depot for this one. And I can go through and fill out my checklist. So this is one I drafted up just before. So you can see here we've got a series of questions, just checking everything is looking good. With your forms module, we'll go through it shortly, but you can do things like take photos, you can do signature boxes. So I can actually sign this as well and then finish. Now that's all gone through, stored in the system for me. Just a couple of ones to call out for you. A really useful one could be one like our traffic accident form here, which could be used by your drivers to report traffic incidents while they're on the road. I can go through, I can nominate which vehicle I was in. I can then read through some instructions. So my head office actually puts through some instructions for me. You can imagine in an event like a traffic accident, you're probably a little bit frantic. If you're going through something like this forms module and it's just stepping you through everything you should do, sometimes it just helps to make sure that those common sense steps are there. So as the driver, I can go through, make sure I've got my hazard lights on, no one else is hurt, so I don't need to call emergency services. Okay, cool, just go through some checks. Again, when you're in a panic state or you've just had something happen that's quite shocking, you may just want some simple steps to take you through. And then I can start to talk about a few of these traffic accident details. So for example, with something like a vehicle require towing, when we go back and look at those settings where we can say trigger emails or SMSs upon certain answers, this could be something where we want to trigger an SMS or an email to a manager if we have a vehicle that requires towing, for example. We can also then say, okay, do we need to call anyone to notify them of those incidents? Do we need to speak to a manager? And then we can start to look at some cool things that we can build in. So the ability to take photos and attach this to that form as well. So you can see here, I've got some instructions. as the driver, I can go and take some photos. So we'll jump through, and as you can see here, just when we talk about testing as well, when we're going through and testing, I'd recommend setting all of your forms just to be accessible at any time to let you go through and have a play around. It's not going to force the prompt onto your drivers or your staff without anything, first coming through your testing and making sure you're happy with everything. Just a couple of other ones you might want to look at as well. Simple things like training or meeting attendance logs. We can do vehicle service reports, which then are attributed against the vehicle in the system. Lots of little forms there you can create. And what we're going to jump through now in a second is just also how you can edit that to really be tailored to exactly how your business needs it to look. And then also beyond that, create your own forms as well. So you may already be thinking about certain scenarios you may have or certain forms you might want to create in the system. And we'll jump through and just talk through that now as well. So to start with, once I've got my forms that are over here, I have the ability to go through and edit the questions that are available. So we'll just look at a traffic accident report. This is a good one to look at as an example, because what it will do is show you a few different options that are in there as well. So coming through, the first thing you do is when you go and edit your questions is you'll be able to see each question that we've built as part of the template. So you can see on the left-hand side here, you'll just see the number in which it appears, the type of question. So you've got text, you could have photo, you can have tick boxes, signature required. You can even do things like sketches. So for signatures or in the vehicle accident report, you're actually sketching out the accident if you need. You can also then have a few other things available too, like an odometer reading where you're prompted to enter in that value. Again, we mentioned things like photos being required. You can have multiple checkboxes. There's lots available there. And you can go through and for anything you're not happy with, for example, in the driver incident report, if we don't want to tell them to call the supervisor, we can just remove that question really easily. What you can also do as well, obviously, is if you want to arrange things in a different order, you can do so. So the first thing you might want to do is make sure that photos are being taken straight away. I could move that up to question number 2, for example. And then you can see the system's smart enough to actually go and adjust the order below. So it will reshuffle them for me. As you go through with anywhere in Transvirtual, if you're not sure about anything, just press this question mark here. It'll give you a little summary as well. So you can see here things like, your instructions are available, the question number. While maybe a little bit obvious, just remember you've always got access to these little areas too. And something like the skip question will give you a good explanation where maybe the title isn't as relevant. So for example, for skip question, we're basically saying that this will be skipped during the normal sequence. It's almost like only under certain conditions do we actually come to this. So in the example that what we might have is where a driver select they're impaired, we may be triggering that response to say a manager needs to input a password. And so by default, we're going to skip that question unless the answer is set. And to create those rules, we do that from the advanced settings here. And what we can do is jump to questions. If anyone's played around with Microsoft Forms or anything similar, you would be used to this functionality. It lets you just essentially dictate, once you answer a question, where should you go next in your form? And if we click on the add button here, this will pop up a few little options for us. I can see first thing is what's the selected answer? And then what I can do is say jump to question. So for example, with someone saying, does your vehicle require towing? We can create that. And what we can say is, sorry, we'll jump back. If we go down to our, does your vehicle require towing? What we can do for this one is essentially say, if someone gives us an answer of no or yes, where should we go next in that sequence? What we can also do is generate alerts as well. So this is a pop-up that's going to go to the staff member or to our manager, for example. And this is where we talked about triggering those SMS or emails to go to the manager. We can make sure that that goes to them and warns them. Typical ones would be drivers being impaired or someone requiring a tow, for example. We might want to pop them in to make sure we get some action quickly. And as that staff member's filled out that form, that's going across to them. So as you go through here, my recommendation always is probably safest to start with templatized forms and edit them themselves. You can go through, move them about, adjust the order in which things appear, trim the text, edit it. For example, the driver pre-start, forklift pre-start checklist is pretty solid. There's a fair few questions in here. You don't need to be recreating this yourself. You might simply want to work off our template here and then make sure that you're happy with it, but you're not doing too much work. So we can see as we look through, we've got all these different checklists here. Now, with a checklist, just to flag, you'll see here, essentially each new line will represent a checklist item. So basically, as you type out your checklist, just hit enter. Imagine the same logic as when you type out your bullet points in a Word document. Enter will just create a new bullet point for you. So if you did want to go down the path of creating your own template, you can just create a new form from here. This is really just going to let you start from scratch. And for anyone who's looking to do something really out there, to be honest, I don't have many good ideas as to what else forms people might want to use, because I find typically the templates are heavily utilized amongst our customer base. But I'm going to be uncreative and write sample form. And then from here, all I need to do is just do the exact same thing with hit edit questions, and I'm just going to start from scratch and build those forms out myself. So building these forms, editing them, will take a bit of practice. It's just a reminder to make sure you step through and do some testing first. So create a sample form, enable it, but don't trigger it for every event. Just say it can be triggered manually and do some testing. You can control which user groups can complete forms as well. So in the event, for example, you want to make sure that agents of yours who are using your own Transvirtual logins don't have access to do that. You might turn off forms for agents. You might also want to restrict it to certain user groups. Where this can be helpful as well is when you're trying to differ between forklift drivers and your vehicle drivers, for example. What you might want to do is create a permission group for both your forklift drivers and then your drivers themselves, your delivery drivers. And then that way you can say, for the forklift drivers, upon logging in, we're going to trigger that notification just for that user group. Whereas for our drivers themselves, when they hit leave depot, we want to trigger the driver fit for duty questions as well. So you can create that level. You do need to create those permission groups as well. Just for anyone who hasn't encountered permission groups before or user groups, you can adjust them from your configuration tab. You can create new security groups as an administrator. To create a new security group, what you effectively do is clone an existing one. So in the event we want to make a forklift driver and a van driver security group, what I would do is add a brand new one here. But what I would do is actually clone my operations group here. And then from there, I can assign my staff members to it. That's done from the staff card file tab. If we jump over here, each staff member or user can be assigned a permission group from here. And we can add them to that new group, remove them from the existing one. And when we talk about triggering the forms only for those user groups, we make sure that we've got that aligned and our forklift drivers aren't having to fill out driver pre-start checklists or fit for duty questions and vice versa. Perfect. So in regards to the forms module, that's effectively everything you have in terms of configuring it. The last thing I'm just going to run everyone through is where you can access this information. So there's a few places you'll see forms appearing. For any completed forms under your reports tab, you do have access through the administration screen here. So just go down under your reports tab, administration, go mobile forms. And from here, we can see any forms that have been filled out by staff members. And you can see the form name, the vehicle they're associated with, when they filled it out, and the staff member as well. You'll see here we've flagged some times where the driver fit for duty question failed. So essentially they gave us a response that was undesirable. So we've jumped in there and we can just action that. As we mentioned before, we've got those ability to trigger notifications or for the system to lock that form until a supervisor comes, but it's still just a way for us to view it. And if I go into any individual form, I can see the answers submitted. I can see which question they answered incorrectly to. We even have some ability to say where they answered that at as well. So for things like your accidents or certain forms where you want to understand their location, that's really useful. And we can see those answers here. And I can see the incorrectly answered form or the triggering form that we needed to be aware of, and we can see it flagged. So this gives us a nice little record. I can print or share that as well. So if we open that up, we just get a quick little format. Now, for anyone who's familiar, you can use our report editor or our report designer to adjust the way this appears as well. If you just want to adjust the formatting, it's actually a set report in the system. But ultimately, Transvirtual acts as your little filing cabinet for all of these as well. Now, in the event you ever need to look back and say, well, on this day, there's accusations that a driver, may have done something wrong, you can look back at the form and say, well, they did fill out their fit for duty form complete. We've covered ourselves there. We asked them all those questions, they answered it. So as far as our knowledge is concerned, they were doing the right thing and they weren't under the influence. They've declared they hadn't, weren't impaired, just creating that assurance for the organisation. You'll also find that against customer staff cards, I should say, you can find a forms tab as well. So completed forms against that. So if our drivers have completed any forms, we'll see that there. And then that can also be done against vehicles as well. So if we do have any vehicle checklists that have been done and our forms link back to the vehicle itself, what we can do is make sure that we can track that as well. Jump through, and again, you can see here those completed forms against that vehicle. So in regards to the forms module, going to leave it there. It's as simple as is. We do have a knowledge base article that runs through this as well. So if you're looking for a little guide, make sure you jump onto support.transvirtual.com. Search for COR forms and you'll find a nice little guide there outlining how you can use the module. As you've seen here, it is quite self-explanatory once you get in. I'd always recommend playing around with those templates as a starting point just to give you a feel for it. There's no issue with going in adjusting those templates because you're copying them. So the existing template's always going to stay there in the system for you. So don't stress if you want to go and create your own versions. You might end up with some Frankenstein forms. You can always delete them and start from scratch again. Just quickly, I'm sure everyone on this call already knows it, but if you need to get in touch with Transvirtual, make sure you email support@transvirtual.com. We'll help you out with any support queries. If you're looking for any knowledge-based guides you're after or some general guidance, the team will be able to help you out. If you do want to book in a strategy meeting with myself, talk about your general use of the system at a higher level, or you want to understand more about Transvirtual, or discover some areas like the WMS module or our planning module, reach out to me via email. We'll make sure we get you set up and we can help you out and explore Transvirtual a little bit more.